Amir loved the English language, but often felt trapped by his mistakes. Words slipped from his tongue in broken forms, tenses twisted, and sometimes he used one word when he meant another. At first, he believed these errors were proof that he was failing, but slowly he began to discover that each mistake carried a lesson, waiting quietly to be uncovered. One day, while trying to say island, Amir pronounced the S clearly, and his friend corrected him gently, saying, "The S is silent." Amir laughed at himself, but never forgot that moment. What once embarrassed him became a permanent lesson, sharpening his ear and teaching him to listen more carefully. Another time he confused borrow and lend, creating a funny misunderstanding in class. Instead of sinking in shame, Amir wrote the two words side by side in his notebook, drawing small pictures to remember their meanings. That mistake, instead of remaining a weakness, became the reason he never mixed them up again. His grammar mistakes were even more frequent. He often said he go instead of he goes. But each error revealed the pattern of verb endings he needed to practice. Like a map, his mistakes showed him the exact areas where his learning had to grow. Over time, Amir realized that fear of mistakes was more dangerous than the mistakes themselves. The more he tried to be perfect, the quieter his voice became. But when he spoke boldly and allowed mistakes to appear, he found courage growing inside him. Corrections from teachers and friends stopped feeling like judgments and started to feel like gifts. Reading helped him too. Whenever he stumbled over a sentence, he circled the part that confused him, and soon he noticed that the very mistakes he made while reading were the ones he remembered most deeply. Each repetition turned the error into knowledge. Amir's journey taught him patience. Some mistakes returned again and again, like guests who refused to leave. But with time and steady practice, even those stubborn errors gave way. He learned that mastery was not about avoiding mistakes, but about transforming them into stepping stones. And so, Amir grew fluent, not in spite of his mistakes, but because of them. Every error carried a hidden lesson, and every lesson brought him closer to the English he once thought impossible. He discovered that mistakes, far from being enemies, were his quietest and most loyal teachers. Mistakes are natural signs of learning, not failure. When someone begins to speak English, errors appear as naturally as shadows appear when the sun shines. They are not proof that you cannot learn. They are proof that you are learning. Imagine a child learning to ride a bicycle. The wobbles, the falls, and the scraped knees are not failures. They are the very process of balance being discovered. Without those falls, the child would never learn to ride. Language works in the same way. Each misstep with pronunciation, each wrong verb tense, each misplaced word is part of the training your mind and tongue must go through. If you never make mistakes, it means you are not challenging yourself enough to grow. They are signals that you are moving, reaching, and stretching beyond your comfort zone. Many learners feel embarrassed when errors slip out, as if mistakes expose weakness. But in truth, mistakes are like fingerprints left behind on the path of progress. They mark the exact spots where growth is happening. When you recognize this, shame turns into motivation. You begin to see errors not as proof of failure, but as signs that you are building something greater, one stumble at a time. Mispronunciations can sharpen listening and speaking skills in ways that perfect speech never could. When you say a word the wrong way and someone corrects you, your ears suddenly become more alert. It's like tuning an instrument. You only notice the sound is off when you strike the wrong note. From that mistake, your ears learn to listen more closely, and your tongue learns to move with greater care. Amira once tried to say the word comfortable, but she pronounced every letter slowly, as if the word had 4 clear parts. Confortable. Her teacher smiled and said, "In natural English, it sounds more like comfortable." At first, Amira laughed in disbelief, but then she repeated the word again and again, listening to the way her teacher's voice glided through it. That small mispronunciation became the moment she trained her ear to notice how English often shortens sounds. Each time you mispronounce a word, you are being shown where your listening still has room to grow, and every correction pushes you toward sharper hearing and clearer speaking. Far from being failures, mispronunciations are little stepping stones that guide you closer to the natural music of the language. Wrong grammar choices reveal patterns to improve, and they often show up in the same places again and again, almost like gentle reminders. When you say, "she go to school," instead of "she goes to school," the mistake is not meaningless. It's pointing directly at the rule your mind has not yet fully mastered. Each slip of grammar is like a teacher whispering, "Here is the pattern you need to see." Karim struggled with past tense verbs. He often said, "Yesterday I go to the market," forgetting to add "went." At first he thought he was simply careless, but after hearing the correction many times, he began to notice how often verbs changed their form in the past. Instead of feeling defeated, he started keeping a small list of verbs in 2 columns, present and past. Every mistake added one more verb to the list, and soon his sentences began to shift from broken to smooth. Grammar mistakes are not roadblocks, but signposts. They highlight exactly where attention is needed, and once you study the pattern, the mistake fades away. In truth, grammar rules become clearer not from reading them in a book once, but from bumping into them again and again until they finally settle in your memory. Mixing up vocabulary builds deeper word awareness, because every time you choose the wrong word, your mind is forced to slow down and notice the difference. At first, it may feel embarrassing, but that slip is actually sharpening your understanding. Imagine trying to use borrow when you meant lend. The mistake creates confusion, but the correction plants a stronger memory than if you had only studied the words on a list. Sana once told her friend, "Can you borrow me your pen?" Her friend chuckled and said, "I can lend you my pen. You will borrow it from me." That small mix-up stayed with Sana forever. The moment of confusion became a bridge to clarity, and from then on, she never forgot the difference. What seemed like an error was, in truth, a powerful lesson that no dictionary alone could teach. Each vocabulary mistake shines a light on the edges between words, showing you how they are similar yet different. With time, these edges grow sharp, and your word choices become more precise. Far from being failures, these mix-ups are the very reason your vocabulary grows richer and more accurate. Overthinking errors creates fear, while embracing them builds courage. Many learners freeze when they speak because they worry about saying something wrong. Their minds run in circles, checking every word before it leaves their mouth, and in that pause, the courage to speak fades away. But language grows in motion, not in silence. When you accept that mistakes will happen, your voice flows more freely, and each word builds your confidence. Farah once joined an English club at her school. The first time she spoke, she kept stopping mid-sentence, correcting herself again and again. Her classmates encouraged her, but she felt trapped by her own perfectionism. The second week, she decided to speak without worrying, even if errors slipped out. To her surprise, the conversation went smoothly, and though she still made mistakes, people understood her better because her words came out with energy and courage. That day, she realized mistakes were not as frightening as silence. Fear makes errors grow larger in your mind than they really are, but courage shrinks them back to size. Every time you choose to speak boldly, you prove to yourself that mistakes are not enemies but stepping stones, and the more you embrace them, the braver your English becomes. Corrections from others are gifts, not judgments. At first, they may sting, especially when you feel proud of trying, only to hear someone point out your mistake. But hidden inside every correction is a piece of knowledge you didn't have before. Without those small gifts, you might keep repeating the same error without even realizing it. Omar once told his teacher he don't like apples. The teacher gently corrected him, he doesn't like apples. Omar's face burned with embarrassment, but that moment stayed in his memory far longer than if he had simply read the rule in a grammar book. From then on, whenever he said he, the word doesn't came to his tongue naturally. That single correction became a permanent change in his speech. When you see corrections as kindness rather than criticism, you begin to welcome them. Each one is like a key that unlocks a door you didn't know was closed. Over time, the collection of these keys opens a wide world of clearer, stronger English. Corrections are not there to push you down, they are there to lift you higher. Reading and hearing mistakes in context strengthens memory because the lesson comes alive when it's tied to a real moment instead of an abstract rule. A grammar book can show you the difference between there and there, but when you see it misused in a story or hear it used wrongly in conversation, the correction strikes deeper. The mistake becomes linked to emotion, and emotion helps the memory stick. Layla discovered this